Hey, Ryu. Stories about abandoned children are so heartbreaking. What do you think people in the past felt when they had to give up their children?
It's a sad topic, but actually, abandonment was often tied to social conditions and cultural beliefs. Let's dive into the details today and explore the history behind it.
Let's start with ancient and medieval times. Were child abandonment and even selling kids already happening back then?
Yep. For example, according to the Nihon Shoki Chronicles of Japan, there was a famine in 676. And some people asked permission to sell their children. The imperial court didn't allow it at the time.
That sounds like the right decision. But didn't they change their stance 15 years later?
Exactly. By then, they started tolerating it. Later on, the Euro Code in 757 even allowed parents to sell their children with the child's consent. But honestly, expecting consent from kids sounds pretty absurd, doesn't it?
It must have been a desperate time. Poverty must have played a huge role in these decisions.
Absolutely. There's even a Buddhist tale collection called Nihon Ryoiki that includes many stories about parents' actions leading to children's suffering. One tragic example is about a mother who neglected her child because she was too caught up in chasing men, and the child starved to death.
That sounds eerily similar to modern cases of neglect. It's sad to think this kind of tragedy has been happening for centuries.
By the Edo period, abandoned children became a serious issue in cities.
Wasn't that around the time of Tokugawa Tsuneyoshi's laws of compassion for all living things? I've heard about protecting animals. But did it also address abandoned children?
Yep, in 1687, his laws encouraged reporting abandoned children and finding foster parents. But enforcement was left to local towns and government offices. Didn't take much action to save the kids.
Foster care must have been tough. And I guess some foster parents were in it for the money?
You got it. They'd receive allowances for raising abandoned kids. So some lower-class city dwellers took in children just for the funds. It's a sad reality, but that's how it was.
From what you're saying, it seems like abandoned children were just seen as part of society back then. What about the modern era? How did things change?
Starting in the Meiji period, laws were introduced, and the number of abandoned children began to decrease. Back in the Meiji era, there were about 5,000 abandoned children annually. By the Showa 50s, 1970s, the number had dropped to around 200 per year.
That's thanks to laws like the Child Welfare Act, right? Did institutions like baby homes and foster systems also start around that time?
Exactly. It marked a big step in creating a system to protect children.
And today, one of the major initiatives is the baby hatch, right?
Yep. It started in 2007 at GK Hospital in Kumamoto. It's a system that allows parents who can't care for their babies to anonymously leave them in a safe place.
But something like that alone can't solve everything. There's still a need for broader support.
Definitely. Child abandonment is closely tied to issues like poverty and social isolation. The baby hatch is just an emergency solution.
By the way, I heard people in the past didn't feel much guilt about abandoning their children. Why was that?
There are a few reasons. One is economic hardship. When parents absolutely couldn't raise a child, abandonment was seen as a necessary choice.
And the high infant mortality rate must have played a role too. I've read that it was common for children to die young, due to illness or malnutrition.
That's right. Losing a child was such a regular occurrence that people might have been more accepting of the idea.
But the belief that abandoned children grow stronger is surprising.
There was a superstition that kids who were abandoned would grow up tough enough to survive anything. Some parents even followed a ritual of abandoning their child, and then picking them up again right away.
Speaking of which, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's first son was named Suta, meaning abandoned, right?
Yep, the name reflected that belief about abandoned kids growing strong. Hideyoshi wanted his son to thrive, but later renamed him Tsurumatsu.
Looking at this history, it's clear that views on child abandonment were deeply shaped by the times and society. It's such a different mindset compared to today.
Exactly. People's attitudes change with the era.
Abandoned children also appear in fiction, don't they?
Oh, for sure. Like Zenitsu and Inosuke from Demon Slayer. They're both abandoned kids, but their backgrounds are totally different.
Zenitsu was abandoned as a baby, so he never knew his parents and always felt unwanted.
Yeah, there's that scene where he tells Inosuke, "If you were really abandoned, no one would bother writing your name on a blanket. Look at me, I didn't even get that." It really shows his pain.
Inosuke, on the other hand, was deeply loved by his mother. She abandoned him to save his life.
Exactly. His mother threw him down a cliff to keep him out of a demon's reach, leaving his name on the blanket as a sign of her love.
Two abandoned kids, but Zenitsu was unwanted, while Inosuke was protected. That contrast really tugs at your heart.
That's what makes these stories so relatable. Even in real life, every abandoned child has their own unique story. Speaking of which, one of the Demon Slayer pillars, Himejimagyo-mei, used to take care of orphaned kids at a temple before joining the Demon Slayer Corps.
Tracing the history of abandoned children shows how much the circumstances and responses have changed over time.
It really does. Poverty, social inequality, and cultural beliefs all played a role. Modern welfare and laws have made things better, but there's still work to be done.
We need to learn from the past and create a society where all children can grow up feeling secure.
Couldn't agree more. Let's keep diving into these deep topics in our next video.
Everyone, please take some time to think about this issue. See you next time.
See you. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.